Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good morning, everyone. So I think we didn't do the class for roughly 3 or 4 weeks. So, but still we haven't finished the topic of ultimacy. There are a few more lessons left, so we'll be continuing with them from where we stopped. If you remember, we already discussed about all the classifications or clarifications about ultimate realities, and then the last lecture was about Dhamma and Dhammasas, realities and phenomena. Then today we are going to discuss about the concepts, the Paññattis. So I think as we have had a long gap or a vacation, so it's better to have the idea about the also again to write the chart of ultimacy. So it's normally Paramatta, the beginning. This is ultimate ultimacy. Then it was divided into 2 groups, Sankata Paramatta and then Asankata Paramatta. Then Sankata Paramattas were 4-fold as Paramata Dhamma, then Paramata Jatika, sorry, Upadino Dhamma, that's right, Upadino Dhamma, then we had Paramata Jatika, then we had Anupanna Dhamma. Paramata Dhammas are the ultimate realities that has an arising. So Upadino Dhammas are the realities, resultant mentalities and materiality that is supposed to happen due to a karma that has already gained the opportunity. Paramata Jatika are the latent forces such as the latent defilements and the karma force that remains after karma has been done. Anupanna Dhammas are the possible realities that could happen if the conditions prevail without being removed. Then this in the Paramata Dhammas were divided into 2 groups again, Nama and Rupa, mentality and materiality. Nama Rupa. Then in the Asankata group, the unconditioned realities, we had 5, it was 5-fold as Sammuti Nibbana, Tadanga Nibbana, then we have Vikambana Nibbana, then Samuccheda Nibbana, Nissarana Nibbana. These are the liberations we call nirvana, that is the freedom from the suffering that is supposed to happen. Then we had in the corner we had something apart from the ultimacy, Paññatti, the concepts. Just 2-fold as Atta Paññatti, Namapanyati. In the Namapanyati group, we had a special one called Saddha Sabhava Paññatti. These are the concepts. We are going to discuss about them today. Then in between, we had few other rupas like Anipanna rupas and so forth. We also arranged it in another order. At the end of those lectures, we said 5 Vikara rupas. Then we had Tilakkana. It also included 4 Lakkana rupa. Earlier, I wrote it at 10 Anipanna rupas altogether, but later we could be able to divide them in a different manner. Then we had Ekaccha Pacce Satyo. That is some conditional forces. Then we have Gati, Bhava, and so forth. Then we had Ajatakasa. Under the Ajatakasa, we also had Parichedru, Akasa Dhatu, or Parichedrupa. Then time comes here, Kala. Kala is something which is in the Paññatti group, right? Kala. So this was our chart. Then we had the Dhammas and Dhammatas, the difference of Dhamma and Dhammata. Dhamma and Dhammata. Dhammata was 5-fold. Utuniyama, Bijaniyama, Chittaniyama, Kamma Niyama, and Dhamma Niyama. Right? These are the 5 Dhammatas. So now I think this was the entire chart that we had discussed so far. Next week, I'll be talking about Ekattanaya and Nanattanaya. Ekattanaya and Nanattanaya. So far we have discussed all the topics in the chart. Today we will be discussing about Paññatti, the concepts. We also discussed about Kala. Together with Ajatakasa and Kala were discussed together. So today our attention is about Paññatti, which are the concepts that are synthetically produced objects in our mind. So all the ultimacy means, if I remind what we have done so far, to be considered something as an ultimate reality, the very basic quality, the requirement is that it should have its own intrinsic nature, and also it has its own functions and so forth. So all these realities do have these qualities, and there were some natures that are not exactly exclusively called as realities, but do exist in a certain manner. Then everything other than what has been created in our mind are the Paññattis. Then the ultimate realities, the existence of ultimate realities is governed by certain laws. So these laws were called Dhammata. So there are 5 types of laws that we discussed briefly in the last lecture. So now we focus on, these are the things that do exist according to the Theravāda tradition. These are the things that are concepts of the mind. When we say a concept, it's not a, now for instance, sometimes we can say anger is a concept, something like immaterial stuff, according to some philosophers. But according to Theravāda tradition, anger, some mentalities are realities that do exist in reality, in fact. So these are the ideas that are created in our mind, looking into groups of ultimate realities. We'll find out what it is today. So I'll erase the chart and focus on Paññatti only, the concepts. So we can also call them synthetic products of the mind. Ultimate realities are what exist in the according to Theravāda tradition. So looking into these ultimate realities or thinking about ultimate realities, we create certain ideas that do not exist in reality. So these ideas are just products of the mind, we can call. Just products of the mind. Now, Paramata Dhammas, if we talk about Paramata Dhammas, we have Nama and Rupa. Nama is mentality and Rupa, materiality. So these Nama and Rupa exist. They have their own independent existence, but they depend upon each other. They depend upon each other. So according to Buddhism, combination of Nama and Rupa is considered as a being, a living being. A sentient being is a combination of Nama and Rupa. These Nama and Rupa exist in generations, depending upon each other. So, but we are unable to separate them intellectually or with our minds. So we consider them as a one thing or a one person. It's like from far away, when two things are kept together, from far away distance, we may see it as a one thing, but when we get closer, we understand it is a combination of two things. So likewise, when the wisdom is not sharp in us, we tend to think that this Nama and Rupa are the combination of Nama and Rupa as one thing or a one living being, creature. But when we develop our insight wisdom, we separately focus on Nama and Rupa at separate times, and then our understanding grows and we get to know that this is just a combination of two elements, not a one thing. So what happens is, when we look into these Nama and Rupa, we get four different ideas. We have some different perceptions or ideas about this combination of Nama and Rupa. We consider this as a one thing, one living being, or a one being, right? Instead of taking it as two separate elements, we consider as a one being. Then these Nama and Rupa they perform certain acts. Now each Nama and Rupa has its own functions. I'll be explaining them detailedly one by one after we name them. So, so this one thing, one being, we consider it as a one being. So this is a synthetic product of the mind. The being, the idea of a being is a concept. What really exists is the Nama and Rupa. So this is the Paramatta level. The ultimate level. It means the ultimate. Now these are the concepts. Ultimate level and conceptual level. So looking into it, actually there is only Nama and Rupa, Chitta Chetasikas and material. They are separate elements, but taking them as one thing, we consider it as a one living being. Then one being, then what happens? Another idea is these Nama Rupas have their own functions. For instance, when we think about lifting our arm, it's a combination of Nama and Rupa. The act is a combination of Nama and Rupa. First, a chitta arises with the intention to lift the hand. With that intention, according to the tradition, a certain air element arises associated in this area. Then this hand is a combination of four great elements. So when the chitta arises and the air element pushes, this hand tends to move. So it is not done by a one single being. It is an act that is executed or happening due to the combination of various functions done by various elements. So, but what happens is we tend to think that an I or a person lifts its or his hand. So instead of considering that Nama Rupa doing their own functions, we consider it as a one living being who does the acts, who acts. One being who acts. So instead of knowing that because of the chitta, the four great elements moved, we consider that I lift my hand. So this I, the living being who is capable in acting or performing functions, is a concept. First of all, we consider it as a one being. Then we consider it as a one being who can act, who acts. Then what happens? This Nama and Rupa exist in generations. I think we have drawn that diagram many times. So Nama Rupa arises, it passes away, a different Nama Rupa arises again. It's a continuation. It's a generation. It's not one thing is remaining to the entire day or an entire life. So what happens is, it's a generation of Nama and Rupa, but we tend to consider that a one single living being lived the entire life. Our idea is the living being, one single being, who is called I or anyone else, used to or lived this entire life. So instead of considering it as a generation of separate Nama and Rupas, new Nama and Rupas, we tend to believe that there is a one being who lives, continues to exist. In another way, living means continues to exist. So then another idea is now only based on now for the fourth idea, fourth type of concept, we don't consider about the Rupa, we only focus on Nama. Various chittas take various objects while we live. A certain now a chitta with a lobha attached chitta would take a pleasant object. Chitta with anger would take an unpleasant object. Chitta with doubt would think about some deep phenomena and would be uncertain about its existence. So likewise, now when we see something, the chakku viññāna arises, the eye consciousness. When we hear something, the ear consciousness arises. When we think about something, the mind consciousness, mental consciousness arises. So likewise, various objects are taken by various consciousness. But what happens is, we tend to think that there is a being who is inside this body who takes various objects. So instead of considering that there are various chittas that take various objects, we tend to think that there is a one being, living being, who takes various objects. So knowing who focuses on various objects. So one being who cognizes various objects. So these are the four main ideas, like concepts that we create in our mind. But actually, what exists is Nama and Rupa. What exists is Nama and Rupa. We are unable to know this reality in this level. We are unable to see Nama as Nama and Rupa as Rupa. What happens to us is we combine them together and we consider it as a one living being, or I. We can also call I who acts, I who act, then I who live, I who cognizes various objects. Right? When we think about ourselves. So the basic idea is consider something as a living being. So this idea, now what really exists is Nama and Rupa. Unable to separate them intellectually or with our wisdom, we tend to consider them as a one living being or a one thing, or I. This idea of I, or this idea of a one living being, is not a reality. Looking into this, we create a new idea about one thing, but that idea is based on these Nama and Rupa. If the Nama Rupa was not there, this idea would not occur in our mind. This idea would not occur in our mind. But the thing is, this idea does not exist in reality. Does not exist in reality. I think we discussed about this matter in the beginning of these lectures, that how a living being can be reduced into Nama and Rupa. Now, if we consider about our body, this body is a combination. If you consider about our body, This body is a combination of various body parts. So these body parts are made out of 4 great elements: Patavi, the hardness; cohesion, the heat element; and the air element. So when we separate, now if we go into these body parts, even when we separate these body parts, we understand there is no such one thing called a body. Is only a constitution of various body parts, and even a one single body part can be reduced into 4 great elements. So we get the idea that there is no such a thing called a body. It's a combination of 4 great elements. At the same time, when we think about our mind or our thinking element, we understand it changes one after another. It's not a one consciousness that remains throughout the entire life, cognizing or knowing various objects. The consciousness changes one after another immediately, very rapidly. So if we consider, while we are happy, if we consider that consciousness as I will be a person who is fully happy all the time. If we consider the angry consciousness as I would be a very harsh or a bad person who is always angry. So likewise, but the thing is, it is a combination of, when we consider about I, we know that a person who can get angry, who can become happy, who can doubt. So we have all these qualities when we consider about I. So idea of I is not based on one single consciousness. It is something regarding the entire process of consciousness. So the inside I who thinks cannot be reduced into, it cannot be attributed to one reality. It is an idea that is constructed looking into various consciousness, a stream of consciousness. So likewise, when we investigate thoroughly, we get to know that there is no such a person or a thing that can be called as an ultimate entity. This idea of a person or idea of I is something that is created by our mind looking into the existence of Nama and Rupa. Nama and Rupa cannot be further reduced into its components. The idea of I, the idea of a living being, can be reduced into its components. So if something can be reduced further, that is not should not be considered as an ultimate entity, because it's a combination of the components. So likewise, now when we look into the reality, we find it's Nama and Rupa only that exist, but considering them as unable to distinguish them as separate entities, we tend to collectively call them as a one living being, So this idea of a being is a concept. This idea of a being is a concept. What really exists is Nama and Rupa. These are realities. Looking into these realities with mind, which is also another reality. Mind is another reality. It belongs to the Nama. Mind belongs to Nama. So the mind and body exists with the mind. We look into these process and with elements, 2 elements, unable to distinguish them in their own intrinsic nature, we create a new idea that there is a living being here. So this idea of a being is a concept. It is not something that really exists. We cannot verify it. Looking into what, I'll repeat again, these are the things that are really existing. If someone consider Nama Rupa as Nama and Rupa instead of a one being, that is an actual understanding. But if we understand it as a one living being who lives or who is existing, then that idea of a being is a concept. It is not, also we should keep in mind that it's also not necessarily that the conceptual ideas are taken by unwholesome consciousness. No, sometimes even the wholesome consciousness, the functional consciousness of a Buddha would also take this concept as a concept. Looking into the Nama and Rupa, he would consider himself, he would call himself as I. He would call Venerable another Arahant as Sariputta. So the thing is, the difference between him, Arahant, and us is that we tend to believe this idea. We tend to hold this idea strongly. And we believe that there's a one living being. Buddha may use the word and say that there is a living being, that I am the greatest person in the world, or Sariputta is coming towards me. He has such ideas, conceptual ideas, but that he has not plunged into that idea, and he's not holding as a reality. So that's why if sudden death happens to an Arahant, he doesn't get frightened, or he doesn't get sad, because the thing is, he knows that there is no living being. He uses that for mere conventional usage. It's like a drop of water on a lotus petal or a lotus leaf. It is not soaked. It is always unattached to that. So likewise, an Arahant who uses these words, the conventional words, as a living being or I, he intellectually or within himself, he doesn't have that belief that as we do, that this living being truly exists. So that is the difference. So then we come to the second type of concepts. So all the Nama Rupas has their own functions. Chitta has the function of cognizing an object. Lobha has the function of attaching to an object. Dosa has the function of disliking an object. Patavi has the hardness, has the function of holding the other elements. Cohesion has the function. Apo has the function of binding things together. So likewise, each and every element has its own functions and also has its capacities. Due to these capacities, they perform certain acts. They have their individual acts and also collective acts. For instance, while we lift our hand, the consciousness takes the object of lifting, but that consciousness cannot alone lift the hand. The contact of that contact, or the passa which arises together with it, touches the object. The feeling tastes the object. At the same time, collectively, they lift the hand. So there are two types of functions in ultimate realities. They are individual function and collective function. So because they are interrelated to each other. So when the they can perform collective functions while they are performing the individual functions. So one single entity cannot perform an act that has to be done with a collective function. They can do their individual functions alone with the support of others, but to do a collective function like lifting the hand or moving or reading something, thinking, understanding something, it has to happen with the combination of many realities. We are unable to lift the hand if the consciousness didn't arise, or the intention didn't arise, the hand would never be lifted. And if the elements are not properly functioning, even there is an intention, like in a paralyzed person, the hand would not be lifted. So likewise, it is a combination of many elements that these collective functions are done. So but the thing is, we are unable to notice this. We are unable to notice this. When we lift our hands, we never think that a consciousness occurred, then the air element appeared because of that consciousness, and the hand was lifted. The four great elements moved. We never think like that. We think that I lifted my hand. So therefore, we are unable to, when we are unable to separate the Nama and Rupa, nothing to say about not being able to recognize their individual and collective functions. If we are unable to recognize the Nama and Rupa separately, nothing to say that we are unable to recognize their individual and collective functions. Instead, we think that one living being who is called I, or who is called our mother or father, does these acts. That is how we tend to believe. So that idea of a living being who acts is a concept. It is something, according to Theravāda tradition, is not something very true. What truly happens is functioning of Nama and Rupa. Nama and Rupa function, perform their own functions and do these collective acts. Instead of knowing it in that level, we tend to understand that a one living being is doing all these acts. So this is a concept. This is a concept. So I also want to mention that even Arahants do have this idea. The difference is they do not believe it as we do. They do not hold this very strongly as we do. Then about the Nama and Rupa. Nama and Rupa has a very rapid lifespan. It's a very short lifespan. It changes very rapidly, arises and passes away. But as soon as one Nama and Rupa passes away, a new Nama Rupa occurs. That is the nature. So generation would not be cut off. The lineage keeps on continuing. But what happens to us? Are we able to recognize this continuation of Nama and Rupa, of occurring new and new elements? No. we tend to think that a one living being who is called I lived this entire life for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. But in reality, according to the Theravāda teachings, what has happened is two processes of Nama and Rupa, depending upon each other, happens. Now, this is when this Nama and Rupa appears and passes away, it's completely gone. A new Nama Rupa occurs. This is one, this is two. There's another new Nama Rupa occurs. So they have their separate existence, individual existence. They are not the one thing, same thing. We are unable to know this. One would be able to understand this only after attaining the Udayabhaya Jnana, the wisdom of knowing the rising and falling. Udayabhaya Jnana, Udayabhaya Jnana. Till that, we tend to think that there is a one person who has been living this entire life or an entire day or entire time. So that idea of a one being who is living is a concept. It's a false idea. It's not a reality. The reality is the Nama Rupa is happening one after another. New Nama Rupas are happening. So the idea of a one living being, we are unable to distinguish and see this reality. So instead, we take it as a one thing, and we tend to believe that a one person has been living this entire time. So this idea of a one living being is a concept. What really exists is the generation of Nama and Rupa. Then the fourth idea is it's only regarding the mentalities. Because the consciousness, the conscious element is the most prominent or the important part of a living being. Body also is necessary for us. But the thing is, the body works only when there is consciousness. The body is useful only when there is consciousness. That's why a dead body can do nothing, and it is out of any, it doesn't have any value. So the conscious element is a very, very prominent thing, and the most of the time our idea of self is based on this conscious part. We tend to think, we move, we think, we move, we do all the acts because of this conscious element. So the idea of a self, idea of a being is implanted or mostly attached to this conscious part. But according to the reality as explained in the Theravada tradition, there is no one single consciousness that remains this entire life. Various new consciousnesses occur one after another. So these consciousnesses have various objects. They take various objects. Now, while we see some program in the television or in the computer, we seem like at the same time we look into that and also we listen to the voice. But if you observe very closely, while we are seeing, we are not listening. While we are listening, we are not seeing. It happens very, very quickly. There's a rapid change in between the consciousness. So while we see, the eye consciousness occurs and it passes away, then we listen with the ear consciousness. Then we think with a different consciousness. So this happens very quickly. But what we tend to believe is that there is a person called I, maybe within the body or inside the body or this entire thing, according to the preferences of the person, personal preferences. That person is observing and listening and thinking. They're the same person. But according to the tradition, according to the teachings of the Buddha, what has happened is we have seen the object with one consciousness, we have listened to the sound with a different consciousness, and we have thought about it with a different consciousness. So we are unable to distinguish these various consciousnesses. So we tend to think there is a one person who is thinking. In reality, it is various consciousness taking various objects. The idea of a being who looks into these, who knows, cognizes various objects, one being, is a concept. So this is also, this idea is also in the conceptual level. So these are the four main concepts that we create based on Nama and Rupa. Based on Nama. Now, normally the examples are given in books about the chairs or tables. when chairs and tables, when we dismantle them or remove their parts, the idea of chair removes, and even they can be reduced into particles, and even a single particle can be reduced into 4 great elements, right? So this is the normal idea. So the idea of chair removes while we go in the analysis. So this is regarding our lives, ourselves. So when we think about a living being, now unconscious things, it doesn't act by itself, and it may live, it may continue, and it doesn't have this conscious element. So when we focus on unconscious, inanimate things, we have 2 types of concepts. It's a one thing, we consider the 4 great elements that appeared in this in a certain shape. We call it a one chair, which is a conceptual idea, and that those elements, those nama and rupas, the material stuff, arise and pass away very quickly. But we think that the one chair existed. But according to the tradition, new rupas have occurred in generations. So when we focus on inanimate things, we can have only 2 types of concepts. But when we go into animate things, the living beings, we may have 4 types of concepts that we consider. Instead of knowing it as nama and rupa, we consider the thing as a one living being. And also, instead of knowing that these acts are done by according to the capacity of nama and rupa, that is a functions of nama and rupa, we tend to think one living being does these acts. And then instead of knowing that these nama and rupa are happening in generations, new nama rupas occurring after the past nama rupas have passed away, we tend to think that one living being is living. Is a wrong idea. Then instead of knowing that there are various consciousness taking various objects, we tend to think one living being is aware of various objects, right? So these are the 4 conceptual ideas that we get being unable to distinguish nama and rupa. Then I also mentioned that even arahants have these concepts. Arahants also have these concepts. The thing is, when we look in now, understanding the nama and rupa as nama and rupa is necessary for our deep understanding, but it doesn't mean that you have to always be in that understanding. That is necessary while you are meditating. After while a person is doing his own other stuff, if we can have the mindfulness, it is very great. It's very high level of spirituality, but it is not necessarily. So while we do our own other stuff, if we are able to contemplate this nama and rupa during our meditation sessions deeply and profoundly, that would affect us. So even arahant is not always contemplating on nama and rupa. He does day-to-day activities. He preaches Dhamma. He talks with the Buddha. He addresses others with the name. He calls himself myself. So in such occasions, he is not aware of the nama and rupa, but the understanding he has gained has removed the defilements or the ignorance about nama and rupa. So even when he uses these conceptual words, that's the difference. He is not believing as we do, because the latent defilements have been completely removed. So the basic now, the difference is, even though Arahant whole has these conceptual ideas, he is not holding into them like we do. Why do we hold into these conceptual ideas and believe that I do exist? I am the person who acts. I am the person who lives, and I am the person who knows various objects. So we are afraid of this person dying, or we are afraid that something would happen to this person. Why is that? We tend to believe and we hold into these ideas as reality. We are unable, the Arahant is aware that this is the ultimate level and this is the conceptual level. So even while he's living in the conceptual level, he's thinking in the conceptual level, he doesn't hold it as we do. But our mistake is we are unable to distinguish them. We take this level as the reality. We take this as the reality. We don't have that deep understanding. While we preach Dhamma, while we meditate, we may have it, but it's not well established. Why is that? The latent defilements are still there. So what the Arahant has done it, he has understood this and completely removed the latent defilements. So even while he is not meditating, he is not going to hold into these ideologies as true. That's the difference. So therefore, why these conceptual ideas? We believe in these conceptual ideas because we have not gained the proper understanding about Nama and Rupa. So these are the ideas. So these kind of ideas are called Paññatti, because looking into the Nama and Rupa, understanding and unable to distinguish them, we hold it as one thing. this idea of things is called Paññatti. Is a meaning. Meaning of a one person, meaning of a one person who acts, meaning of a idea of one person who lives, idea of one person who knows various objects. Paññatti. That's how we call them. Then there is another type of Paññatti called Namapanyati. What does it mean? This in reality, Nama and Rupa. This is consciousness and mental factors. These are corporeality. Fine. But they have their names according to the Theravāda tradition. Corporeality. We have Patavi, Apo, and so forth. Consciousness, we call it Chitta. Mentalities, Passa, Vedana, Lobha, and so forth. So all these names about these realities. Reality, the mentality and materiality are realities. They do exist. These natures do exist. I'm not talking about the natures. Naming them. How do we address them? Buddha has given them names. These names are called Namapanyati. Names, we can call. They are the names. They are the names. Names are also concepts. We are using them to refer to something. And also looking into the unable to distinguish Nama and Rupa, we consider as a one living being as Satta. In English, being or I. These are also Namapanyati. The idea, the name that the usages, the words that we use are Namapanyati. The idea is a Attapanyati. The idea of a living being. Idea of a one who acts. A being who acts. Idea of a being who lives. Idea of a being who takes various objects. These are ideas. These ideas are called Attapanyati. Names are called Namapanyati. That name can be a name that is used to a reality or used to an idea, a concept. Doesn't matter. All falls into Namapanyati. The names are Namapanyati. Then the ideas that we have, these Nama and Rupa is a Paramatta. Nama and Rupa is the ultimate reality. So when we look into this stuff, we now this is how we categorize them. There are realities, Paramatta, and ideas, Attapanyati. Looking into these Paramattas, we get the ideas of a living being or a tree or a one thing. That is Attapanyati. The names for Paramatta are Namapanyati. The names for these ideas, because we tend to call, if something is the four great elements exist in this type, in this manner, we call it a table. In another language, we may have a different word. So likewise, even though now the idea is a one thing, the idea, when we say all idea is a one thing, instead of considering it as four great elements, combination of four great elements, we consider it as a one thing. So that idea of a one thing is the Attapanyati. The name that we gives to it as table is a Namapanyati. So Namapanyati are the names either used for the realities or to these conceptual ideas. As also we should keep in mind. Namapanyati. Now Patavi, the word Patavi, the name Patavi, hardness, the name is a Namapanyati. The quality of hardness is a reality. The quality of hardness is a reality. Then the idea of I, the idea itself is a Attapanyati. The word I, that we use to refer to that idea is Namapanyati. The wordings, the namings are Namapanyati, either for the ultimate realities or the conceptual ideas that are created in our mind. The synthetic products of the mind are Attapanyati. Looking into the realities, we consider it as a one thing. This is a Attapanyati. The name that we use to that idea is a Namapanyati. Maybe a table, we call it a table, or a chair, or a living being, or myself, or I in other languages. Different words, ahang in Pali, mama in Sinhalese, all these are Namapanyati. All these are Namapanyati. So that is also one thing that we have to keep in mind, that the difference between Attapanyati and Namapanyati. This is Attapanyati, the ideas. The Namapanyati are the names. Right? So this is what the idea is. So now, before we go into Saddha Sabhava Paññatti, one thing we should mention is, now this Nama and Rupa, something which is related to our practice. What exists in the reality is Nama and Rupa. Understanding Nama and Rupa as they are is a part of our practice. The first stage of our Vipassana meditation. Now, separating Nama and Nama Rupa as Nama Rupa, and understanding there is no living being, there is no being who acts, there is no being who lives, there is no being who takes various objects, is called, there is a word for that. These ideas, that's what we should keep in mind first. Now, these ideas of a living being, being unable to recognize Nama and Rupa as they are, we tend to consider it as a one thing. So that idea, these ideas, these ideas which are called Attapanyati, they are also called Gana in Pali. Gana, one thing. It's quite difficult to translate it. Gana is a one. Sometimes we call it a solid thing. Yes, group. That is, of course, group also can be called. Is one thing. Gana. That's how we translate it. Gana, one thing. So we consider as one being who acts, one being who lives, and one being who cognizes. Right? Gana, one thing. Idea of a one thing. We have to dismantle or to segregate this Gana. For that, why this Gana? Where this Gana is located? What is this Gana is about? About two different elements. We consider it as a one thing. The idea of one thing is the Gana. So what we have to do is Gana Vinibhoga. Gana Vinibhoga, to separate the one thing into its constituents. Now, this one person, as we think, if we are able to know what is consciousness and what is the material thing separately, the idea of a one living being disappears, and we understand it is two different elements. If we are able to know while we act, it is a combination of happening of various elements, functioning of various elements, the idea of one living being is acting would disappear. And if we are able to recognize the different Nama Rupa arising and passing, then the idea of a one living being living the entire life, the idea would disappear. And if we are able to recognize the various consciousness taking various objects, the idea of one living being cognizing various objects would disappear. So the Gana, the idea of Gana would be gone, would be disappeared. That is called Gana Vinibhoga. We separate this one element into its constitution. That is overcoming the concept and coming into the reality. We overcome the conceptual level and comes into the reality level. That is called Gana Vinibhoga. That is what we have to do in Vipassana in the early stages. And even at the higher stages, when we contemplate Anicca, Dukkha, and Anatta, we have to focus on different aggregates like Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana separately. So when you focus them separately, automatically the idea of one living being would disappear. So Gana Vinibhoga is very important or very vital throughout the entire Vipassana. If we are unable to separate this Gana, if we are unable to Gana Vinibhoga, to destroy this Gana, one is unable to do Vipassana meditation. So therefore, understanding about this is also very vital. Then before we conclude, I also mentioned about something called Saddha Sabhava Paññatti. Saddha Sabhava Paññatti is under the Namapanyati. Now when we look into a letter, for example, when you look into a letter, if we talk about house, right? Look into these colors. What we see is the color. But as they have been, colors have been written in certain shapes that we have already learned, we can pronounce the word house. The word house, this is a word. Looking into this word, we get the idea of a house. Idea of a house and the word house are two different things. We read the word house, but what we see is the color. Looking into this color combination, we get the idea of we get the word. It's also one kind of idea. It's also one kind of idea we can call, but it's the idea of a word. So this word, if someone knows this, if someone haven't studied the English language, he will not be able to get this idea. But the one who has studied this idea, he would get an idea about some kind of a thing like this, right? So this Namapanyati is looking into these colors. We get an idea of a word. The Saddha Sabhava Paññatti, which has been explained in Paramata Dhammas, is about the sound. Now, while someone is listening to a sound, now if he utters the word house, the word has to be uttered with various sounds. A lot of sounds appear at that time. Lot of sounds appear while we utter this word. Each and every single sound doesn't have any meaning. When we say house, the house, that sound, many sounds have occurred. So after listening to all these sounds, we get one idea. We get one idea, which is also a word. It is also a word. The thing is, when these words were uttered, our mind collectively takes these sounds and creates an idea of creates the word of house. Now, what happens here is looking into the colors, we get this word idea of the house. But here, by listening to these sounds, we get the idea of a house. In a word, we get the idea of a word house. We get the idea of a word house. After knowing that, then again we move into this idea. This is Atta Paññatti level. Now we are talking about this level, Namapanyati. These are Namapanyati. These are Namapanyati. The difference is, this is something that is taken listening to many sounds, and this is something taken by looking into colors. So there's nothing much difference in it. So whenever Lady Shadow suggests, and also we can, when we think, we feel that there is a slight difference in there. So, but they both fall into this Namapanyati because they are the words that we see and the words that we hear. So when we hear the words, collectively, the sounds are collectively taken and the word is created in our mind. Then we move into the meaning. While we look into these colors, we create an idea of a word here in our mind, and then we move into the house. So that is called, this collective word is called Saddha Sabhava Paññatti. This is called Saddha Sabhava Paññatti, which is under Nama Paññatti. Right. So this will be the lecture. So today we studied about the difference of concepts and the realities. Realities has their own intrinsic nature. Realities has their own functions. Looking into this reality, unable to distinguish them as realities, we create various ideas in our mind. These ideas do not have a separate identity, independent existence. They don't have an independent existence. They are just synthetic products of the mind. Because when we analyze them, when we analyze this idea of a being, when we analyze the idea of a being who acts, what happens is the idea disappears and our mind ends in this Nama and Rupa level, right? So I think we have discussed that in previous lectures also. When we analyze deeper and deeper, the ideas would disappear. So they don't have an independent existence. They are just ideas created in our mind looking to the Nama and Rupa. And also we discussed about the Paññatti are the synthetic ideas of the mind looking into the realities. Namapanyattis are the words that we use either to refer into realities or to the ideas that are created in mind. And then we have, for the Namapanyattis, when we get the word looking into the colors or signs, and while we listen to sounds, the Paramata Dhammas suggests that they have slight differences in nature. So he called them as the Namapanyatti that we get while listening. The Venerable Lady Shadow names it as Saddha Sabhava Paññatti. So this will be the lecture, and also we have to keep in mind separating this idea and going into the reality, understanding the reality level is vital in the Vipassana meditation. Without that, we are unable to lead our Vipassana practice. So it is a very important thing that we should see the difference of Paññatti and Paramattas in our practice. So we have done, also we have today finished the Paññatti level. Next week, I'll be starting about the Ekattanaya and Nanattanaya. Then our Paramatta lectures would be over, the theoretical lessons. Then I will start some sutras and see how this Paramatta idea of Theravadians can be found in suttas, in few suttas. Yeah. So I would conclude the lecture and give the forum to answer the questions.
Yes, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much, Bhante. Hello, everyone. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand, or you can put the question in the chat box, and we can help you read them out. Yeah. Good morning, Bhante. Yeah, I have a question. According to my understanding, that there is one classification of Paññattis, and they have two kinds. One of them is the pure Paññatti, and the other one is the Paññatti that is created based upon Paramatta. So could you please explain the difference between these two a little bit, Bhante?
Pure Paññatti
and the Paññatti that are based upon or created based on Paramatta.
Are you talking about Vijjamana and Avijjamana?
Yeah, Bhante.
So now it's also very important to know this classification. We have Paramatta, ultimate realities, and then Paññatti. Now names for Paramattas. Name. This is the reality which exists, and this is the idea in the mind looking into that reality. Now the names. Names we have. For example, if we give some examples, Patavi is a name of ultimate realities. Chitta is a name of ultimate realities. Sometimes Paññatti. Now looking into Nama and Rupa, we create a living being. Living being is Paññatti. It's not a Paramatta. So if you say human or a tree So these are Attapanyattis. So these names, both for Paramattas or Attapanyatti, are called Namapanyatti. Names for Attapanyatti are also called Namapanyatti. Right. These names of Namapanyatti. Now, if you took into this Paramatta, names of Paramattas are Namapanyatti. These Paramapanyatti are based on Paramata Dhammas. Based on Paramata Dhammas. So we call them Vidyamana Namapanyatti. Vidyamana. Vidyamana means existing. It doesn't mean that the Namapanyatti exists. This name, Namapanyatti, is name. Name of an existing thing. Name of an existing. Name of an existing thing. Because Patavi is a name of an existing reality, hardness. Chitta is a name of an existing reality, the consciousness. So we call them Paññattis based on realities. This name for Paññattis based on reality is only for Namapanyatti, not for Attapanyatti. Then these names like human and tree are these ideas do not exist, avidyamana. So non-existing. These are the names. Names of non-existing things. Avidyamana Namapanyatti. So the idea of human, we cannot find it in reality. It's an idea. It's a Paññatti. Paññatti. These are non-existing. These are existing. Paramattas are existing. We can call them pure Paññatti. If someone, I would not prefer that word, but someone can call it pure Paññatti. But thing is, the thing is, now they are names of Paññatti. Name itself is a Paññatti. It refers to a Paññatti itself. Now here the name itself is a Paññatti. Names are Paññatti always. Are called Namapanyatti. Names are Paññatti, but it refers to a Paramatta. So it's a Paññatti based on Paramatta. Here is a Paññatti based on Paññatti. So this word Vidyamana and Avidyamana Paññatti are exclusive to Namapanyatti. We cannot use the word Vidyamana or Avidyamana to Attapanyatti. Attapanyatti is different. Attapanyatti is the idea that we get looking into the realities. Always Attapanyatti are based on Paramatta. Looking into the existence of realities, or the looking into the group of realities, looking into a combination of realities, looking into the functions of realities, we get an idea of a thing. So this Attapanyatti is always based on Paramata Dhammas. There is a one Attapanyatti which is based on the absence of realities. Based on absence of realities. Now, for the best example is the nothingness of the Neva Sanya Na Sanyayatana Chitta. In the Akinchanyayatana meditation subject, we focus on the nothingness of Akasananchayatana. So it's a very special Paññatti. Abhava Paññatti we call. Abhava Paññatti. Absence of a reality. In all the other cases, we looking into the realities, groups or generations, we get one idea of one thing. Sometimes we get the idea of absence of a reality. Absence of a reality is also one kind of Paññatti. It's a very special kind of Attapanyatti. Then, so always Attapanyatti are related to Paramattas. If there is no Paramatta, there is no Paññatti in terms of Attapanyatti. Namapanyatti are completely a different segment, different section. These are the names. Names towards Paramattas, names of Paramatta, or names of Attapanyatti. So if a name is given to Attapanyatti, name itself is a Paññatti. Name itself is a Paññatti, second type of Paññatti, Namapanyatti. If that name is given to Attapanyatti, it's a Paññatti of a Paññatti. If a name is given to a Paramatta, it's a Paññatti of a Paramatta. So Paramattas do exist. So we call them names of existing realities or existing things. If a name is given to a Paññatti, name of a non-existing thing. So it's a Avidyamana Paññatti, and these are called Vidyamana Paññatti. We can call them pure Paññattis, and they are Paññattis based on reality.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And then, so another question, Bhante, is within the Atta Paññatti. Then let's see, we take two examples. One of them is the Patibhaga Nimitta, and the other one is like a human being. Those two should be different, right, Bhante?
Yeah. These are different.
So how should we see the difference between them, Bhante?
These are, we call Nimitta Paññatti. There are various classifications in Atta Paññatti. So we call it Nimitta Paññatti. Human is Samuha Paññatti. Shape of the, if we focus on the shape of this human, Santhana Paññatti. So these are like, it's quite subtle to understand, like why we get this idea of a human. Human is a constitution of rupas and namas, one thing. So looking into, unable to distinguish nama and rupa, which are close to each other, we consider it as one thing. So we call it a Samuha Paññatti, a one thing, idea of a one thing looking into a group of realities. And also there is a shape of a human. Human have a certain shape. So it's called Santhana Paññatti, looking into how the realities are shaped. And also idea of a human can be a Santati Paññatti, like a generation of Nama Rupa which lives, and also a Karaka Paññatti, one who does the acts. So where the human, the idea of a human can be reduced into various types of Paññatti. Then the Patibhaga Nimitta. Patibhaga Nimitta is what happens when we look into a color disk, right? We look into a color disk, which is the color which we created as a Kasina disk. We look into it, and a certain similar idea appears in our mind. A similar idea appears in our mind. So this itself is a reality, but while meditating, we tend to take it as a one thing. So from the beginning, our idea in meditation is a Paññatti, although we are focusing on a reality. So what happens is, when we come into one level, now in the beginning level, in the beginning stage of meditation, we consider as a blue disk. We focus as a human, we get the idea of a human because of the Samuha or Santhana, the shape. While we focus on the disk, it's same. We focus on the shape or the group of realities. So in the beginning, we have a Samuha Paññatti, Santhana Paññatti in meditation. It's similar to a human being. We focus on a human being, we consider as one thing. We focus on a disk full of color elements. We focus it as a one thing. It's a Samuha Paññatti or Santhana Paññatti. But what happens is, when we develop in meditation, we come into a very special stage that this becomes very visible to us. Very visible to us. Sometimes the idea of a human may also be so visible, but this is like, even we close it, we see it as we see it with open eyes. It is something that we feel, one may feel like he can touch it. It's so visible to the person. So that's why it is given a special name of Nimitta Paññatti, because of the clarity of this idea. So otherwise, when we say a Patibhaga Nimitta in the beginning, during the practice, our idea of focusing as a blue disk and our idea of a human are identically same. They are same. The difference is, when it comes to Patibhaga Nimitta and Uggaha Nimitta, it becomes so visible and so apparent, so it is given a name as a Nimitta Paññatti.
I see. Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And then there is one small question, Bhante, about the word Atta Paññatti. So here we translate the word Atta as idea. So it seems to me that it is something related to a mental, can say that the aspect. It's not really a thing, But let's see if we say that when we say it's a human being as a Paññatti, then in fact we refers to the substance. We refers to the substance created by the five khanda, five aggregates. So it's not exactly an idea, right, Bhante? Because when we say a human being, we refers to that substance. But because it's not real, it's not a real substance because it's a combination of a lot of khanda and so on. So how should we understand the word atta correctly, Bhante?
Yeah. So this is the Paramatta level. Looking with the chitta, we get the idea of a human, right? This is the Atta Paññatti. So this idea cannot be found here. What really exists is Paramattas. So chitta unable to recognize them, we take it as one thing. It refers to this person, the one thing. So this one thing, human, is the Atta Paññatti. So if you call it as a substance, but in reality there is no substance, it is an idea of the mind because that substance cannot be found here. That substance cannot be found here. So that substance is the Atta here, as you said. That substance is the Atta. But we have to keep in mind, there was a Buddhist tradition, Sankantrikavadas. They had the idea that substance should be here. They had the idea that there is such a substance here, which transmigrates from life to life. Theravadians bring that substance here, not here, not here. So as you said, the word, I would prefer that word, the substance. So that substance itself is the Atta. Sankantrikavadas in the 3rd century BC, they believe that substance has to be here. While the Theravadians held to the idea in the Kathavattu's first discussion that substance is here, not here. So only the realities are here. There is no substance that transmigrates from life to life. So that substance, according to the Theravadians, that substance is the Atta Paññatti, Atta of this. So the Sankantrikas believe that this substance is not a self. They said it is not a self. It is neither a khanda. It is neither a self. Something between self and khandas, a new substance. They were highly criticized by most of the other Buddhist scholars, Buddhist sects, not only Theravadians. Many criticized them because they believe that substance has to be here. So as you said, I'll use the word substance. It's a very easy thing to grasp. So that's what I referred as an idea. That's what I referred as an idea when I call Atta Paññatti.
I see. Okay, thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And there is a question from the audience, Bhante. So the question is the idea of compactness into one being. So that idea is, does it come from learning since the baby age, or is it automatically formed by avijja, Bhante?
Actually, it is automatically formed by the nature of consciousness, not because of avijja. It is something that is natural to the mind. Mind is unable to remove this compactness. So our minds are created, minds are made. I would not call made by a God, but they are made or they have happened in a way that it is unable to distinguish this compactness. So naturally, from the age of a life from the very first moment we are born, when we see the mother, we will not be able to recognize it as mother. We know it as a one thing. We are unable to distinguish it. So it's not based on avijja. Even Arahant, when he looks into someone, he sees it as a one thing and he considers it as a one thing. So the idea of one thing, the compact idea that is created by compactness, it comes to us because the mind itself is of that nature. It is unable to break this compactness. It's not something. Why the mind has happened in that way, we would call, if the mind is able to separate this compactness, there would be no craving, there would be no enjoyment, the samsara would not happen. So it has happened in such a way that the mind is unable to break this compactness naturally. So I would not call it. It is, according to what I understand, it's not something that gradually builds up. It's not something that is based on avijja. It is a fundamental quality of the consciousness that it takes things as one. when realities are together.
I see. Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And the next question is about it's about Pali. So the question is, what is the word formation of Paññatti? Then does it have anything to do with Paññā, or does it closely relate to Saññā? So if it is related to Saññā, then why it's not called Paññatti?
Okay, Paññatti. Okay, that's a good question. Thank you for that. So, Nyapeti. Pa, the word formation is pa plus nya, ape, ti. So this nya is to know, pa plus nya, and ape. Ape is to causative. Make someone to do, make someone to. So make someone to know. Make someone to know. Pa plus nya plus ape. Nya is to know. Pa plus nya, we can call, pa doesn't have much meaning here. We can say like to, yeah, we'll just go in nya, to know. Make someone to know. So what happened is, so this nya, actually in Sanskrit, the word is nya. So in Pali, this become nya, assimilation. Paññatti. This ending a is dropped. P and T become assimilated into TT. Paññatti. Things that we make others to know. This is talking about Namapanyati actually. We, in the beginning of the world, when the languages were created, the people named them. Okay, we shall call this a chair, we can call this a table, we can call this a man, right? So these words makes the others to know something. These words makes others to know something, know an idea. So that's how it is been created. It has a word of nya, but because of this causative idea, to make someone to know, make someone to know. It's nothing related with sanya or paññā as in the sense of chetasikas. As in sense of chetasikas. Here, nya doesn't mean refer to paññā. Make someone other to know is to understand. Know with a even very basic level. Even very basic. Even for example, if you talk about a dog, right? You call it Snowy or something. It will recognize, right? The word, the dog will recognize it, and it would come, and so we have given it a name, Snowy. So that's we have given a Paññatti, so even the dog can understand it. So likewise, this nya doesn't have a relationship with wisdom, and also it doesn't have a relationship with sanya, to recognition. But actually, when we have named it, now when we have named something as a tree, when the word is used, it is recognized by sanya. It is recognized by sanya. So we cannot remove the idea that there is a huge relationship of sanya and paññā with paññatti. That is obvious. That is obvious. But it has no relationship in the word formation. So therefore, paññatti is the names that we have used to make the others to know. The word of Atta Paññatti, I actually, sorry for that, I forgot that word formation. It's the same word formation, but it has a different approach. Then, as you said, Sanya, now this Patibhaga Nimita, there is one Sanya Japanya. This Nimita, the counter sign, we call it Sanya Jap. It arises, so it happens. Mind is taken, it takes that object based on the sanya. So there is one type of paññatti which is highly related with the sanya, but that is only in the meditation, right? And also while we cognize certain objects, the image that we get. So other than that, this is how the word paññatti is being made.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bhante. And the next question is, can Bhante please elaborate with one practical example of Gana Vinibhoga that is useful for Vipassana practice?
So there is only one way, one basic way to Gana Vinibhoga. Nana Dhatu Samasana. How the Gana Vinibhoga is done is Nana Dhatu Samasana. Nana Dhatu Pariggaha we can call. It's better to use the word Pariggaha. So there is Gana. This is Gana. Gana Vinibhoga. How the Gana Vinibhoga happens? Nana Dhatu Pariggaha. All three Pali words, right? So Gana is the one thing, the idea of a human being, or I, right? So Nana Dhatu Pariggaha means contemplating on various elements, Now, if you think this is a one person according to us, but according to the teachings, it's a combination of 5 aggregates. So what we have to do is we have to focus on Rupa as Rupa, Vedana, the feeling as feeling, perception as perception, Sanya, Sankhara as Sankhara, Vijnana as Vijnana. We have to keep on doing this again and again. You cannot focus on two aggregates at the same time. One at a time. If I take these 5 aggregates, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, and Vijnana. So we focus on them one at a time. Then Vedana, once Rupa, Vedana. Then Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. Sometimes we do it separately, Rupa for a long time, Vedana for a long time, and then at one stage you have to do it one after another. To keep on doing this contemplation again and again. So what happens is the outcome will be natural. That is the beauty of this meditation. So in meditation, when you focus on separate elements separately, one after another, the outcome would be the Gana Vinibhoga. The mind starts to see this as a bunch of elements, bunch of aggregates, group of aggregates. That understanding would come naturally. So what we have to do is, as a meditator, just to focus on separate elements at separate times. But we have to keep on doing this again and again. We should not do it for once and twice and stop. This has to be done because during this long samsara, we have already created this idea of a self for many eons. So it's not easy to get rid of that. So what we have to do is, first you have to understand the Rupa, the characteristics of Rupa, the 4 great elements. So when you do the 4 Rupa, it's better we can do it the Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayu separately, right? And when you do Sankharas, few Chetasikas separately. Other than that, Vijnana, we do the 6 Vijnanas, 6 consciousness. Even if you do it collectively, it's no problem. But it's better always. So we do focus on Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayo, Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayo when we do the Rupa. So we get the idea there is only 4 great elements. There's nothing called a body. Then we focus on the Nama separately, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana separately. Then we get the idea there is no one self inside. Even Vijnanas, we do 6 Vijnanas separately. Then we understand there is no one person, one Vijnana. And when we do the Chetasikas also, that is a solid understanding. Then after having gained that Rupa and Nama separately, we collectively do Nama and Rupa, like Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. We focus on them and understand their intrinsic nature. Focus on Rupa. Then consider it as a non-self reality. Touch, we have to, with wisdom, we have to touch this intrinsic nature. So naturally the mind would start to say that this Rupa is not a self. You focus on Vedana and see its feeling nature, the tasting nature. Then the mind would start to know that there is no self here. Then Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. In the beginning, we have to take some time and separate some time to observe Vedana for few days, maybe few weeks for Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana separately. After we have gained that foundation knowledge, understanding, this, we are not talking about the knowledge, I'm talking about this direct experience. Then we have to keep on doing 5 aggregates one after another. Then what happens? Naturally, the mind starts to think or starts to know, starts to understand. When I use the word think, I'm saying the cognition, which is also understanding, which is also, they are similar in that meaning. It's not thinking means is not fantasizing or just mere thinking. So when we focus on that, the mind starts to consider or think or understand that this is just a combination of 5 great elements. So Gana Vinibhoga would happen naturally. So that's why this formula, Gana Nana Dhatu Parigraha, comes into Gana Vinibhoga. This is what we have to do. This, you cannot force it to happen. The understanding would come naturally. This is what we have to do. So this is the base of Vipassana. After having separated the 5 aggregates as aggregate and getting rid of the idea of self, then we can focus. The Rupa arises and passes away, not the person. Vedana arises and passes away. Sanya arises and passes away. Sankara arises and passes away. Vijnana arises and passes away. If we have not made this base, even though we contemplate Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta, the understanding is not very solid, because time to time our mind would go back into the self idea. So it's very vital that this Gana has been removed from the very beginning. So it's a very good question, and that is how it has to be done. The simile is given. You take a piece of soap with some water. You just keep on rubbing it. What will happen? Naturally, the soap will get dissolved. We don't need to think about dissolve. We have to just do rubbing. So likewise, you don't need to worry about Gana Vinibhoga. What you have to do is Parigraha. Parigraha means contemplating, knowing it's something in its own intrinsic nature. Nana Dhatu, various elements, various aggregates. Know the various aggregates in their own intrinsic nature. That's what we have to do. For that, you have to study first to know what are these qualities of these aggregates. Then we have to understand it with direct wisdom. Even understanding with direct wisdom is not enough. We have to have a very clear idea about that the mind should be developed into a level that you'll be able to focus on Chitta and Chetasika and Rupa separately. Then we have to keep on contemplating. And before that, we have to understand that this is just a mere nature, not a self. So when you keep on contemplating Vedana as a mere nature and not a self, the understanding would come up that Vedana is not a self, Sanya is not a self, Sankara is not a self. So understanding of non-selfness has to be brought for separate elements. Then we have to do it one after another. That is the actual process. So this, even though I mentioned it as Namadhanata Parigraha, it has to come with studying first, knowing, understanding what the characteristics are, then directly understanding them, touching them with wisdom, and knowing them that they are non-self. Then after that, we have to do one after another practice. These are 4 stages. So then the Gana Vinibhoga would happen naturally.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much, Bhante. And there is one short question, Bhante. In fact, I'm not sure I understand the question, but so the question is, if Patibhaga really crystal in space,
Sorry,
if
Patibhaga.
Patibhaga really crystal in space, so that's the question. I'm not sure I understand, but I already
It's
asked
not. Yeah.
I
A
already
bit.
asked the audience to repost, but I haven't received a response yet. So the question is Patibhaga really crystal in space? Crystal
I think.
fan in space. I don't know what it means.
So I think it's something like really existing. Is it? I think the question is something like that. So I would say that Patibhaga Nimitta is not a real thing. It is something created by our mind, not created, which happened to be created by the mind because of our contemplation. It's something that how the mind knows about this object. It's not something that is found in the reality. It's not something that is found in the, like when you see the Patibhaga Nimitta here, for instance, it is not found there. It is something that is in your mind only. So, but our mind gets it with a spatial attribute. Our mind sees it here. So our mind has an idea about the space around here. So for us, it is something special. For us, it's something special. It's subjectively, not objectively. If you open the eyes, it will not be there. If someone can move from here, it's not going to stuck there. It's not going to hit the Patibhaga Nimitta. But for us, it appears as spatial. Spatial means something related to the space. So that's why when we go into the Arupa Jhana, we don't focus on this Patibhaga Nimitta, right? We ignore it and then we go into the space where the Patibhaga Nimitta already existed. So that's why I said, for us, it is spatial. For the meditator, it is something special, which is related to the space, but not in reality. So if someone asks, is it crystal in space? No, in reality, not, but subjective for the meditator, yes. So that's why when we go from Rupa Jhana to Arupa Jhana, we just ignore the Patibhaga Nimitta, and then we just focus on the space where it existed before. So then we go into the Akasana and Chayatana Jhana. That would be my answer.
Bhante, so it updated the question. So in fact, the question is Patibhaga really crystal in the space kasina? So
Yeah,
the object is the space kasina.
Object is a space kasina. Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, it's the space. It is the space. It is the space that we focus. Now, for example, when we think about the Patibhaga Nimitta, if this is a door, for example, if this is the box, right? So this is a hall here, right? This space, this box or a wooden piece, that's the space. So Akasa, we focus here. We focus on this idea. Idea means the area where there is no elements. Yes, there are air elements. There are air elements according to science. We know that, but we are not focused. Air. When we say air in the Hasina, we are talking about abundant amount of air which flows, which is bolting, like something which is in a balloon, or some air that flows and hit our body, or which shakes the leaves and so forth, which shakes a flag. So even though there is air, obviously for here, but we don't focus on that. We are focusing that this area doesn't have any solid or liquid space, liquid elements. So we consider we have to take this area as a one thing. The space is not space like we can have a lot of space areas. One space as a one thing. Or we can call it as the whole. Whole, actually. Right? This whole or the space as one thing. So that's what we focus at. And then the idea of that empty space becomes the Patibhaga Nimitta. That one, we cannot remove it again. We cannot remove it again. When we go into the Ajjatakasa, Arupa Jhana.
I see. Okay, thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Yes, and I don't see any more questions, Bhante. Yes.
Yeah, for example, some would ask what color it could be. It's like if you are in a normal space area, that's a natural color, that empty space color. So if it is located behind some wall or whatever color in that space, now it's like empty color, or maybe there's a surface behind it. So whatever it is, that what we focus on, together with that color, the Patibhaga Nimitta would come. So the color is not the fact. The idea of an empty space is what matters here. Surely it would come with a kind of a crystal color when the Patibhaga Nimitta appears, but it's not what matters in the meditation. What matters is that you have to have the idea that you're focusing on an empty space, empty area, which has no other elements. You'll be able to know whether the Patibhaga Nimitta is or not. When you keep on focusing on that, it would appear and it would become stable. More and more you focus on it, it would become stable. It's not just something that comes and goes. It has to be a very stable object. Then if it remains for a longer time while you are contemplating, you are able to focus on that. Then you don't need to focus on the space that you have created. You can go into your rooms or wherever and then keep on focusing on that.
Sadhu, 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 Bhante. There is one hand, Bhante. Are you going to take it, Bhante?
Yeah, the last question. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. Please go ahead, Susan.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah,
thank you, Ryan, thank you, Ryan, for trying to convey my question. Thank you, Bhante, for explaining it. It was about this Patibhaga Nimitta, of the three Nimitta, Patibhaga Nimitta, the space, as you explained very clearly. The part that I don't understand is, where did the crystal fan comes about in the space? Today, I was just learning this from Sayadaw, and he was talking about crystal fan in the space. So that's the part I didn't understand. Why crystal fan?
You mean the crystal fan, right? What is it?
Yeah, he mentioned crystal fan in the space, SPAC, during the Patibhaga Nimitta of when you're doing space kasina.
Now that is like, for example, now when the Patibhaga Nimitta come, that's why I mentioned the Patibhaga Nimitta of other jhanas even is something very subjective. It is nothing related to the actual space, but for us it is something special. We feel it like something spatial. So when it comes to the Akasa Kasina also, the Patibhaga Nimitta is something very visible. So what happens, it appears to us, it's the idea of space is very important, not the object, not the color itself that we are talking about space. So but it appears to us because our subjective experience always has a space. Even if it is red kasina, it is located in a space to us, not in reality. So likewise, even the Akasa Kasina, the crystal fan appears, still for us it appears in a space. So that's why Sayadaw has mentioned that it is in the space, but it is the space itself. It has been taken from the space itself. So what Sayadaw is mentioning here is, subjectively for us it appears as a something, and for us it is something in the space.
Okay. So it doesn't have to be a crystal fan, right? It does not have to be the shape of a crystal fan.
No, it corresponds on what kind of a whole that you have focused on. It corresponds to the whole, the nature of the whole. So it may change according to what kind of a space that you focused on. So it has to be something visible. It has to be something visible. It's not just the empty space.
Okay.
Because when we close our eyes, now for example, if the red kasina comes, red kasina would be here. The surrounding we will be able to distinguish the kasina and the other spot. You'll be able to distinguish. So in the same way, the Akasa Kasina Patibhaga Nimitta comes, there should be some distinguishing. Like this is not the Nimitta, this is the Nimitta.
Okay.
So that's what Sayadaw is mentioning. This is the crystal fan or something. So that's why it appears in the space. Space here means the area other than the Kasina Nimitta.
Yes. Thank you for clarification. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Yes, I think we can wrap it up, Bhante.
So thank you for listening, and may this merit help us to attain the final liberation and also help the sasana to last long. So, Buddha sasanang chirantittatu. Buddha sasanang chirantittatu. Buddha sasanang chirantittatu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much, Bhante.